because I think just so much about like what everyone was doing for me. Everyone's doing huge favors to like open up their houses to me and take time out of their schedule to hang out with me or keep me entertained at some level. So like I feel mostly that like not that I was a burden, but I feel like I was the one taking from everything. So it's like I guess now that you mention it, it's like, yeah, I mean, like if people were happy to be playing with me and like they got something out of our shared experience together, then that's good. I can.
To the Absolute Guard podcast.
Yes, this is episode 24. My name is Benny, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host John, who is the technical mastermind behind this whole show. I'm kind of just like a talking head. How you doing today, John?
You are a floating head in the way we've arranged the camera here, but you do way more than that, man. So I'm doing okay. I realized that in my camera feed here, you could see my cat's litter boxes in the background. So, spoiler alert: this podcast is shot from the comfort of our own homes.
I might have to put like a filter on Twitch with your audience. It's like, what's going on back there?
Yep. Eddie, actually, yeah. There's some mess back here too. So, whoops. Anyway, how was your week, Benny?
It's been doing good. Just been watching the World Cup, so my sleep schedule's kind of all over the place. Thankfully now things are a little bit more at normal times, so yeah, schedule's kind of been getting back on track here.
I get you. My fiance works at a company based out of Argentina, and so anytime Argentina is up for in a game, like she's like tuned in and like talking with people on her work Slack and everything, and just losing their minds over the game.
Oh, that's awesome. Like, yeah, I imagine like the kind of the whole country stopped. That was like a big thing with like Manny Pacquiao was fighting. Like there would be terrorists fighting in the Philippines, and like they would have a literal ceasefire. They'd be like, okay, this is the time that we're not going to kill each other because Manny Pacquiao is fighting. So like everybody sit around the TV, and then like after this is done, then we can go back.
I've heard the World Cup described as like a lunar eclipse, where it's something that just touches every country in the world all of a sudden, and obviously with the Qatar World Cup, there's a lot of additional conversation around it going on, but for people who love the sport and who are still like who are willing to tune in, like it's a very special experience in a post-pandemic world.
Yeah, I mean it's the biggest sport in the world. I always liken it because like a lot of people like here in America it's NFL football, right? But like I always look at it as like when it comes to like soccer, like you can play soccer by yourself or like with one friend. Like you could pretend to like simulate something and kick it into the goal, right? Same thing with like basketball. With football, like okay, I'm gonna pretend to throw this touchdown and I'm just gonna throw it into the field and I gotta go get it. Like that sucks, right?
Yeah, it's not very intuitive compared to other sports.
Yeah, you can't do the same thing. So anyway, like things have been going pretty good here. I'm adjusting to having Sundays and Mondays off, which is nice. Who do we have on the show today, John?
Today we have Sean Ford Benner. He's our first guest on the podcast who has experience in the Super Smash Brothers community, but also he's got experience everywhere in every fighting game. Like ever since I joined the community, like I've seen him play pretty much every game that I have, and then I've gotten to know him very well over the course of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 in particular. But again, he touches pretty much every game. And like in the pre-show here, we were talking to him and he mentioned himself as the ambassador to the fighting game community for the Smash scene and vice versa. So we're happy to have Sean on here. And there he is. Hello, Ford. How are you doing?
Hey, how's it going, guys? Doing well. Thanks for having me. Hey, there's my wife. My wife's on the screen.
Oh, yeah.
Joining us via old match footage.
Yeah. And in the background here, we've got this footage from when I ran the Ranbats, or me and T Dot in particular, who you all will see pretty soon. T Dot and I ran an organization called Spiral Series, which is where this channel came from, and we ran Ranbats. And the last one, we ended up having a tournament dedicated to Forward and his family. So Ozza's there on the screen.
Yeah, I'm just laughing because it's like Seanception right now. It's like Sean just entered the screen on the background.
Yeah, he's on there twice.
Yeah, which one's me?
Never mind. You were in the back here. I'll go ahead and rewind the video just for fun here. You were in the background of the player cam.
You just walked in like to sit in between the players that were there.
Yeah, right there. You're right between Armando and Webster there.
Oh my god.
Oh,
10
awesome,
years ago, man.
We were younger. It was a simpler time for sure.
Yeah, like you said, man. Like when I think of Sean, like I think of somebody that, for me is was famous for being a Smash player, which I didn't know about. Because I remember just overhearing at tournaments all the time. Like somebody would walk by and be like, "Are you Forward, the Smash player?" And like I would hear them, and I'm just like, "Oh, like Smash." They're like, "Are you that Forward?" And I'm just like, he'd be like, "Yeah, that's me." It's like, "Oh, okay." It's just like I had no idea personally.
The Forward, and I think you can probably get into. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I don't think I've ever met another one, but I'm still the Forward. So.
And how did you come up with that gamer tag?
Before I had this tag, I had signed up on the Shoryuken forums. My handle, it was just made a combination of my two favorite video games, Smash Brothers and Street Fighter. So I was Smash Fighter. Yeah, right. Like genius 16-year-old gamer tag. And one day it hit me, and it's like, man, no one's afraid of this Smash Fighter guy. Like, that's such a cheesy sounding name. So, all the Street Fighter players that I thought were cool and good, like they always just use their full names, right? It was John Choi and Alex Valle and Justin Wong. So I was like, all right, I'm just gonna be Sean B. So then, like one tournament I was at for Smash Brothers, I had this tendency to just always use Falco's forward B move, but on accident. So what he does is he kind of like shoots himself across the screen. So I would like fall off the stage and die because of that, and you could kind of just count on that to happen in any given intense tournament set for me. And then Taj, who is kind of like my old school Smash counterpart, just called me Sean Forward B, and it fit perfectly. Stuck with it.
Oh, I get it. So Forward B, as in with your last. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Forward B.
Yeah, I was just Sean B, and
okay.
I look at it as kind of like Batman. Like that the Batman movie where he like gets afraid of bats or something. It was. I think of it like that. Like, right, I tried to take my weakness or something.
That was
turn it into my namesake.
The Dark Knight trilogy starring Christian B, right?
Christian Forward B.
Very cool. I had no idea. I thought it was just because like you like to hold forward in a fighting game. I didn't know it had anything to do with Falco.
Yeah,
that's fascinating.
What's kind of ironic is that I think I've always been more of like a defensive player too. So it's like, sometimes I want to try to get in and really aggressive and it's fun, but like when I'm playing my best and I get on top of my game, probably my defense out. So
I agree.
Kind of ironic.
Very cool. Well, as for tradition for our podcast guests here, we usually go through some of their background and how they got started with fighting games. Can you give us a storyline of when you started playing and what games you started playing with?
Sure. So it goes back kind of far, I guess, but I started with like Sega Saturn era.
Okay.
Like I didn't quite catch like Street Fighter 2, but as far as like arcades go, X-Men versus Street Fighter, the Alpha 2 series, the Alpha series. That's kind of like when I started to get into it a little more seriously or like quasi competitively.
Okay.
It started because my older brother would like go to the public library. We didn't have a computer at home, so he would go to the library and look up games and stuff. And we liked Street Fighter. We liked fighting games. So he had found like I don't even know. I guess Shoryuken was around at that time, but he had found out that there's like a competitive scene and there's top players. So my brother would just come home from the library and talk about like, oh, there's this really good guy at Street Fighter in California, Alex Valle. And I was like 8 years old or something at the time, and I was just kind of like blown away that somebody is known for playing Street Fighter, and I kind of wanted that. I was like, I want, like, I like video games. I played video games for as long as I can remember, and
Yeah.
so I wanted to, have some recognition and be known for playing fighting games. So that's maybe like the inspiration to treat the series and for the games like a little more seriously, than just like casually playing. Um, so yeah, going back pretty far and as far as like finding a competitive community for it. But I've kind of been around like ever since, and like you mentioned, I've played a lot of fighting games between Smash and the more traditional stuff.
Yeah.
Various accomplishments across different games. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's been fun, and I still enjoy them, so I'm still here.
Yeah. Could you outline some of the accomplishments you're most proud of in your fighting game career?
I guess the things I'm proudest of are just the levels that I achieved between like Smash and Marvel in particular. I'll say like those two games were the games that I've reached like my highest level at within competitive gaming. So with Smash Brothers, we kind of had like local rankings and stuff, and I was the number one player for I think between like 2002 and 2010. I think is when
Oh
I
wow.
finally fell off the throne. So that was like in the very early stages of the game, like as it came out. But still, I kind of held that title for a while of like the best in Arizona, which maybe we'll get into later. But I'll put it kind of like an asterisk on that too, because it was like within our local scene. I would say, well, I guess just to get into it now. So within my local scene, I was usually the one to come out on top. But like if
Sure.
so me and like two other guys, we were like the three high level players, Taj and Wobbles. Like if we traveled out of state, it was kind of a toss up between any three of us, like who would place the highest in the tournament.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I had some good competition to help me train up and everything. Um, so just yeah, I reached like a really high level in Smash. I also like, I guess because I played in such an early stage of the game's lifespan, it's the game has changed a lot since then, and so like back then it was maybe a little more emphasis on like the knowledge of the game, the kind of like, do you know that this move beats this move? Are you
Yeah.
aware of like what to
Yeah.
do in this situation? That type of stuff was like a lot more important, and so I think I had like a really big hand within the scene in general, and kind of like the entire meta of the game of like turning it into what it looks like now. Um,
Okay.
Yeah.
if you watch like Melee from anything nowadays, like you'll see stuff that I was kind of like the first one to do, or to really like implement it as kind of like the core of how you play the game. So that's kind of cool, something I can be like proud of. And kind of similar in Marvel, like I was maybe the best player in Arizona for like 2 or 3 years or something for Marvel 3. And
Mhm.
it's kind of a similar story. Like it was kind of early on in the game's lifespan. Um, I think I got kind of lucky picking up like Doom and Strider because I think those characters carried me a lot. But it's kind of similar. Like I made early early like strides in the game to reach like a pretty high level early on.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, just kind of like being recognized like within not just Arizona, but like within the broader fighting game community too. As I kind of mentioned, like that early childhood Sean who's like, oh, who are these people known for playing video games? Like, I want that to be me. Like, I reached it, I
Yeah.
reached that childhood goal.
Yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
cool. Like you mentioned, like typically we ask like where you started playing competitively, because typically like the origin stories, like I played with my brother, my family, whatever, the neighborhood kids, and then like I didn't get
Mhm.
competitive till later. So like you were talking about like Alex Valle and stuff like that, like the stuff your brother was talking about. So Was your first like competitive game like Smash, or was it like FGC stuff?
Yeah, it was FGC stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because like so we had like Smash 64 on launch day, but like I was playing X-Men versus Street Fighter, before that. That was like my favorite game as a child, like my favorite fighting game. And I didn't go to any sort of like competitive arcade.
Mhm.
So I don't know if maybe for the Tucson listeners, you guys would be like familiar, but I was in like the north side of town. I was like by the Tucson Mall, and so there were like three arcades all like in that area, all really close. And so like it'd be like a weekend, my brother and I would go and we just go hit up every arcade. So first there was like Fantastics, which is like a mini golf area. We'd
Mhm.
play there, and then the Tucson Mall had an arcade, and then there was like a Peter Piper Pizza down the street. And like we didn't have a lot of money. We usually didn't even go out with money, but like we knew what all the broken games were that would like drop tokens where the tokens didn't get accepted. So we would go around to just every machine looking for tokens, and we'd always find like a couple bucks from every place, and we
Yeah.
get like a handful of games in.
Nice.
So that
You
was
just wouldn't
like
lose then, huh?
yeah, well, like again, it wasn't really like a competitive arcade. It
Yeah.
was usually just us like taking turns against the computer, like rounds.
I get you. I think that's actually like a really unique perspective where, you're somebody who has made strides in the Super Smash Brothers community, where the the style of practice is a little bit different than traditional FGC, where FGC was rooted in arcade culture, and then Smash was
Mhm.
rooted more in like home console culture. And I was
Yeah.
curious about like, did you find any like big differences in how competition was handled, or like even like doing gatherings for the competitive community or anything like that?
Yeah, like quite a bit of differences there. I would say with Smash, the like that home console culture, I think a lot of people have similar stories of just like the weekends at friends' houses, right? The slumber parties, the four-player Mario Kart, all that stuff. So um, it was I would say it was almost easier like back then to find Smash. Um, Even though Smash like started off, it's right now I'd say it's bigger than a lot of FGC games, but it wasn't always like that. And
Agreed.
it was just kind of like that small gatherings, just friends at a slumber party type of thing. And I think arcades they had a big advantage, especially like when you're in those very populated cities, like any major metropolitan area, like there's tons of players, and Tucson was not that major metropolitan area. So it's like I had heard stories of like Sebastian, the one-handed terror, and I knew
Mhm.
about Jeff. Like I had heard that he was from Tucson as well, but like those guys
Mhm.
were kind of gone, I think, when I had started. So there wasn't like yeah, I didn't really have any sort of like competitive thing to start with. So but things changed throughout the years, and it's been interesting. So something I want to ask you guys this. Um, so within Smash, I think there was something that I found kind of interesting, that a lot of top players they would come from like smaller scenes. So if you guys
Mhm.
have heard of Armada and Leffen, like from
Hmm.
Sweden,
Yeah.
Sweden was not known as like this. It's a big country, but it's not like the most populated area. And these
Right.
guys, I'd say they mostly got good because they had a good group to train with and good like practice partners. And I think that happened a lot in Smash, where like the best players just came from small dedicated groups.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I've always thought like the fighting games, like traditional fighting games, were a little bit opposite, and that the best players came from just like big communities. So like Japan, right? You've got tons of players, the arcades there,
Yeah.
LA, New York. And so it's not so much about like getting dedicated training with a particular like small group, but like having a large variety of players. It seemed like the better thing to have for Street Fighter.
Yeah, I feel like with so I don't know enough about competitive Smash play to know how important matchups are. I assume that they are really important, but with Street Fighter, I think that the characters like all handle so uniquely different from each other that having and then the open bracket format as well, like where you could just
Mm.
theoretically run into one of 45 different matchups, right? Like you need it,
Yeah.
like it was always a benefit to have a bigger scene and have that much matchup practice. Um,
Yeah.
Mhm.
but in modern Street Fighter era, at least, I've seen that actually go the opposite way, where like the Dominican Republic is really big in Street Fighter Five, and they are kind of a textbook example of a small scene that kind of blew up.
Yeah.
And then if I even look at our Arizona scene for Marvel, Marvel 3 specifically, like we were a pretty small scene compared to the big dogs out there. And so like I almost feel like the traditional fighting games have adopted more of the Smash model over the years more than anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's. No, I was gonna say that's interesting you brought that up because we were just talking to Armando and he was talking about how the leveling up of his game was a result of you and him literally just grinding for hours, like and just that iron sharpens iron kind of mentality, and working with somebody that's at your level and like you guys improving together. Because it's one of those things. It's like you always have those people that are like, it used to be a big thing, like save it for nationals, right? Or save it for Evo, save it
Yeah.
for whatever, right? And it's like
Yeah.
people always wanted to hide their tech, and it's just like I've always been the type of person that's just like, well, why don't I just pull out this BS now, and then if somebody can figure out how to counter it, I'm not gonna look stupid on a bigger stage, right? Like that's just me, right? So it's just like you find people to find counters to the tech that you find, and then in essence, like you're getting better right then because it's just like, oh well, let me try this mix up on Sean. Oh, Sean blocked it immediately. Okay, well maybe this isn't gonna work as well as I thought.
Yeah, and I think that that actually ties into the earlier topic where, with the arcade culture, we were less, or rather, I don't say we because I wasn't really part of the arcade culture, but I feel like they were less inclined to try new and interesting things because there was something on the line. They didn't want to get kicked off the station. They didn't want to lose the quarter or anything.
Mhm.
And so the experimentation and the creativity that comes with finding those unique things, like compared to having Smash on a home console and being like, I have unlimited games available to me. Let's try
Yeah.
something new, you
Free
know?
play. Hmm.
Yeah. And that kind of, I think that lends itself to the way that you're thinking there, Benny, where it's like, I would rather find out now in an environment that has lower stakes than
Yeah,
in a big tournament, right? Or at an arcade where I might have to wait another half an hour to get on the stupid machine.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, man. It's a good lab or whatever you want to call it to test the viability of stuff. And like you said, like unlimited replayability in terms of like being at home. Like I never even thought about that in terms of like the comparison of the scenes because like you said, Smash was console only. There's no Smash arcade version. Whereas, you had to go if you wanted to find competition at the arcades, it was like either you had competition at the arcade that you went to, or, as like, people like Scott and Jeff had talked about, like you'd go to the next arcade and be like, all right, let me see how these guys are and compare myself to them.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And like you said about saving it for nationals, there's value in not it was value in hiding the tech really to make sure you could bring it out when it's most competitively advantageous. And to be
Yeah.
clear, I want to say that like we say FGC as if that's the normal thing, but like as far as esports go, like if you look at any competitive gaming experience nowadays, it's much more in line with the way Smash was, which is I have a console, or in like StarCraft or like MOBAs or Twitch shooters even, like I have a PC. And so they always took place at home, and they had LAN parties or something instead. And the arcade culture was just something very, very unique specifically to the FGC, I think.
Yeah. That's a good point. It is pretty unique, right? Like it's not maybe early chess was similar or something where it was like, oh, it helped to be able to play against like 100 different players who are all doing these wacky openings that
Yeah.
having like good practice against like that adaptability was important or something like that. But nowadays it's like it really seems to all the fighting games seem to um, reward like depth of knowledge more so than the breadth of knowledge. Like Super
I
Turbo
agree.
or something, right? You think about like, oh, it's a very matchups based game, and
Yeah.
so if you know the matchup, like you're going to be safe. So having that scene to like practice the simple matchup strategies of like the 10 different players, like you could grind out Ryu versus DJ and Super Turbo for like 100 hours, right? But you're gonna get destroyed as soon as you play a Honda. So just like
Yeah.
that style of game didn't even lend itself very well to like that sort of um, deep deep exploration of characters.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
I've heard it. Well, I think we were talking about this with Nico last week, but the matchup is almost like the blueprint that you play the game off of, and then the actual player to player interaction is within the framework of that matchup. And I think your point was that older games, the matchup was so definitive and oftentimes so
Mhm.
lopsided due to lack of balance patches, the balance patches that we enjoy in today's day and age, that you could get by with just knowing the matchup and only that, and not really having that same conversation with the player.
Yeah.
Did you find that? So, like, I said earlier, I didn't know too much about how in depth matchups were with Smash. Were there any big polarizing matchups in Smash Melee that you like? Is it more like on the ST side, or is it more like on the modern side as far as balance goes and player expression?
Um, I'd say it's more on the modern side. One sec, I'm gonna turn my light on. My room's dark.
No worries. No longer dark and brooding.
Yeah, I'm not 16 anymore. I'm not playing games in dark attics, dark basements. Um, let's see. So for Smash, matchup versus like characters versus player. I think Smash is a really deep game, so it definitely favors like having the depth of knowledge. But there are still like a handful of matchups, um, and it's this probably goes for all kinds of video games. There's a big element of like meta and meta advantages. So in Melee, like Fox is the best character, widely considered number one, and he's like the most popular one. So any given tournament, there's a good chance like 5 out of 7 matches will be against the Fox player.
Hmm.
And if you play like anything for like the between the mid and high tier characters, there's a good chance that you're gonna have like a strong meta advantage in that bracket. Because like those 5 foxes, chances are like you have more experience in the matchup fighting Fox than they have fighting your character.
Okay.
And even though Fox is like great and on paper he can win all those matchups, there's the players themselves probably don't know them as well.
Yep.
So Arizona has like the best Pikachu player, Axe, and I think he's benefited from that a lot. He's eaten like plenty of foxes. Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted with this Marvel. I love watching Marvel to this day. I'm still watching Marvel,
I was
and
watching it too.
Aziz is
You're
doing.
talking about the counter X Factor that we just saw?
Oh yeah, and it just Aziz, his
Yeah, with that mix up.
setup and stuff. Oh god,
Yeah.
knock him down in the corner. He would do the gravitational like
Yeah.
keep him in the corner, and then send him to wake up in his drones.
Yeah, I was trying not to laugh right there when they were like pushing themselves towards the screen because in that part it was him and Armando that were like moving up to the screen as close as possible. Oh man.
So yeah, so you're saying that matchups like the Fox matchup in particular wasn't so oppressive that it muted player expression or the conversation between the players, and you could still kind of
Yeah.
play against the person, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like if the person doesn't know the matchup, then it's gonna be like free win.
Yeah.
So the matchup like is very important. But it's kind of like for a few characters. Like certain characters, the matchup knowledge is a lot more important than it is for other characters. Because of things like the weights of the characters, they, fall at different speeds or something. So like if the most common matchup that you do play, if your combos in that matchup also work on like another character that you play less frequently, you can probably get by. You'll be okay there. But then a
Mhm.
character that like you need, entirely different character specific combos for, that's where you're going to run into problems if you don't have those.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, the matchup thing is something yeah, it's something I talked about before too as from playing Honda. Like, there was people all the time that would play Ryu and Sagat. That's a bad matchup for me. But for me, like I played so many people online, so many people offline that play those two characters that it's comfortable, right? And it's just
Yeah.
like how much experience does that Sagat player have against playing a Honda? Whereas I have, 300, 400 matches playing against different Sagat players. So
Yeah.
it's like I feel like I have the advantage just because of I've played that match and I'm comfortable with it. I know what I can do. Like it would always surprise me like when people would throw like a low tiger shot and I would headbutt and they're just like, "You can do that?" And I'm just like, "Huh?
You
Yes, I
didn't
can do that." It's
know?
like, "How did you not know that?" You know what I mean? It's just like again, it's like a knowledge check and it's just like
Yeah.
it goes to your point exactly.
And the knowledge check, yeah, it kind of ties back to what you brought up originally with your Falco play and whatnot too, as you were the person that was finding all that stuff at the beginning, right? And
Mhm.
well, I'm assuming it was Falco, but you did find a lot of things, and you set the meta for our local scene as well. And so it kind of became of a game of like how deep is your bag of knowledge checks, right?
Mhm.
So I am actually kind of curious about that era because we don't that doesn't happen anymore because nowadays the bag of knowledge checks is just as deep as Twitter goes, and everybody can find anything and then take that and use it. So like when you found like a new mix up, or I'm not really sure how to put that in Smash
Yeah.
terms, but
What does Smash even have, right?
yeah. What would be an example of a knowledge check for Smash back then?
um. Platforms. So in the early days of Smash, just like the how to use platforms was just not as well understood and developed as it is now. Um, so just does the person like if you use platforms correctly, you're going to be a lot faster as a character. Like it just gives you the options to do more action. But when the game was like first out, a lot of times platforms were just looked at as like a hindrance. Like, oh, I want to go do this jumping attack, but the person's under a platform, so the platform's in my way. Um, so and then they jump on it, and then maybe they'll jump off or something.
Yeah.
That just we weren't aware of like all the myriad of options that we had at the time. So um, yeah, there I it's I'm not exactly sure, like on a national scene, because like kind of on a local scene. Another weird thing about melee, was that like the players that do get really good. So like I was the best player. I started off in Tucson, and I didn't have like a particularly strong scene to play with there. Like I was a level or two ahead of everybody else. But like I was able to be at a high level still without like particularly high competition as well. So, I think there's definitely like a limit on how far you can go there, but I maybe it just goes to show that like, developing like enough tools on your own can get you pretty far. And so the thing is though is that like yeah, even though my tools were that I was making were better than like other Falco players, um, the the good players of those regions that were still like that were kind of like me, they're like two steps ahead of their local scene, that they were developing anti Falco techniques as well. So
Ah,
like it always kind of balanced out. Um, it's something really interesting like from like the past meeting there. I don't know how much it really happens nowadays, like everything's online and all the information's there instantly with Twitter, but like there was always like a community level up from a national tournament, right? Because now it's like everybody has a chance to like get together and compete, and so now everyone gets to like share and see all the tricks, and it was really just like yeah, like the whole community could level up in the game because now I'm showing everybody my tricks, and I'm learning the tricks from the guy in New York, and Texas players are bringing their tricks.
wow.
That was something that was like I always thought was really cool. That I don't know if it happens anymore.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, because like especially now with like Twitter, like I mean, like I said before, there was that mentality of kind of like saving things until a better time competitively or whatever. Whereas nowadays, it's like for the the word I'm thinking of, the prestige or whatever, the just to be like, hey, I'm the one that came up with this tech, or I'm the one that did this first, right?
Yeah. the Twitter guys, like they always want to name it after themselves, right? And it's like somebody invents it for the third time, and it's like the third name attached to that one technique that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's always a good way to kind of find out too, right? If you post it on Twitter and be like, "Hey guys, I just figured out this tech. I'm gonna call it the Benny," and then somebody's like, "Oh no, somebody did this 2 years ago." I'm like, "Oh
That's not
man!"
the Benny.
Like,
What are
yeah.
you talking about? That's the John. And person C comes like, no, you guys are all wrong. That's the
It's funny that we
Yeah.
joke about that, but like I think like the like perennial example of that is wobbling, right? Someone naming it after themselves and it's sticking with the entire community. Like, and that's one of your training partners is Wobbles.
yeah. Well,
I
so he didn't name it that though.
Oh,
Oh,
really?
really?
He didn't name it that?
Yeah. Oh no. Well, so even okay, it's kind of a funny story with Wobbles gamer tag. Like before he was Wobbles, I think his name was like Honorbound. I think that was his tag.
Okay.
And that's what he gave himself. And then when he came to Arizona, like we called him Rob Flacco. So there was a Texas player named Rob Falco. That's what he went by. So then when he got to Arizona, we're like, oh, there's this new guy here, Rob. He's from Texas. And we're like, oh, Rob Falco? It's like, oh, no, not that Rob. Like, oh, you're the fake. You're Rob Flacco. So it was that for a little while. And then Wobbles came about randomly because one of our friends was playing Gunbound. Guys, for that old game, but like his character's name in there was Wobbles. And he just liked, he's like, oh, that's cool. I'll be Wobbles. And then he went to a tournament, like one of the first, like it was a regional, but it was kind of still like the first time that the greater community gets to see like how strong and I don't know if like ubiquitous, but like how centralizing of like of a move and strategy it can be.
Sure.
And because his tag was Wobbles, everyone just called it wobbling, but it wasn't. He was like going to this tournament saying like, "Hey guys, check out wobbling." It was kind of known about, and I think at the time maybe people just thought it wasn't practical, and show that it very well is, and it's perfect. It's one of the most perfect coincidences to ever happen because like the characters look like they're wobbling the way that they're doing the headbutts and stuff like that, and it's just pretty lucky it all worked out.
So yeah, it was kind of like a series of different coincidences, but since then everybody on Twitter is trying to replicate that same experience, right?
Yeah.
Trying to name it after themselves. And that's hilarious that like he had like a fake person name and then he ends up like coining an entire mechanic and redefining the meta essentially, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so
like what if he had gone to that tournament as honor bound still, right? With it like, oh, they're bounding.
They're bounding.
It's a weird name. Like what name would it have been called had he not taken Wobbles like 2 weeks earlier?
Yeah, nice. So I know one thing that John wanted to talk about. He called it your couch surfing days. I didn't know what he was alluding to last time when he mentioned it, but I decided to right before this I decided to look up just look up your name and Smash history and come across Liquidpedia page for you. And
Okay.
it says in 2006 Ford spent around 5 months traveling across the United States, living the life of a vagabond, attending as many Smash tournaments as he could. He wrote about the experience on his All Brawls / Nintendo Dojo account.
Yeah,
So you can tell us a little bit about that, because I don't know anything about this. Like John obviously knows some history behind it.
Yeah. So the story behind this was that I was like 19 years old. The lease was up on my apartment, and like I didn't know what I wanted. All I knew that I wanted to do was like play Smash Brothers. That's what I knew I wanted to do. And so it's funny. Like now, people usually call it like doing a forward, or they're like, "Oh, I'm a new age forward." Like when somebody does traveling, but like I had known somebody else in the community who had kind of been doing that. Like he would go to a tournament and then like stick around the local scene for a while before he went out somewhere. And so I kind of knew it was a possibility. So it's like, all right, my apartment lease is up. I don't know like what I'm going to do next, but there's like a handful of tournaments over on the East Coast that I want to go to. I've never been there before. And I started off with like, I think I had like 2 or 3 weeks planned out in the beginning. So I started off, I went to like Massachusetts. And then after that, like the tournament that weekend, I went to New Jersey. Like I stayed with somebody for a week there. Uh, then like New Jersey for a weekend. So that's kind of how it would go. Like I would find, a tournament that I'd want to go to, and I'd go on the message boards and like look for housing. Um, it's even more like I feel like that's more dating myself because I don't know if like people like the community houses each other anymore like they used to. It's like all the big events are hotels and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
but back then like just community housing the other people from out of state was like that's what was done. That's what people always did. And so like I kind of took advantage of my notoriety back then that people like wanted to train with me or play against me and stuff. So, a lot of times it wasn't too hard to find housing. And yeah, that went on for like 5 months. I went to the East Coast, to the Midwest, to the West Coast, and then back east again, and came back. And I guess I stopped because I ran out of money. I don't know.
Did you have?
Well, no, I was doing okay. And so technically that would make me a professional, right? Like I was making a living playing the game. Like I was living out of a duffel bag and sleeping on Greyhound floors sometimes, but like technically it's a living. So maybe so one of my friends, he's like, you were the first professional smasher. I guess so. But no, I guess it that did give me the opportunity to kind of like get it out of my system in a way. Like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was just like I was working at a restaurant at that time, like before I started traveling, and I didn't have like a career or something that I wanted to do. So that had kind of like inspired me to like, all right, I can't do this forever. Um, oh, little did I know, haha, but jokes on me. But like
stuck around, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, it just made me like, okay, I want to go do something else now. I gotta go like find a career. And I still like Smash. So like I did that in 2007, and then like I said, I think I got dethroned from the #1 Arizona rank in like 2010 or so. So like I was still playing even when I stopped, and I was like probably at like the highest level I'd ever been like not too long after that. But I don't know. It was a lot of fun, and nowadays it's like people still kind of do similar things. Like Nico, Came Blue River. He's or basically anybody from like Europe. A lot of times when they come over here, it's like it's like, hey, you're traveling across the oceans. Like, try not to just like get more out of your trip than just the weekend tournament, and see how long you can stick around. So
yeah, like anytime like like an out of state player would come and visit our scene for any game that I played competitively, like the whole scene would kind of unite around them and get as many games in from that outside perspective as possible. And so you mentioned that your notoriety kind of like opened up more opportunities for you to couch surf and people to open up their places. And I imagine like the way you repaid that is to play a lot of fucking games with them and level them up too, right?
Yeah, I tried. I had a lot of fun. Like everybody that I stayed with, I'm still in touch with like a lot of those guys, and consider them friends and everything. But yeah, like the way how you said, like the community kind of gathers around, like that was always a thing. Like oh, forwards here, like, and then a lot of people come down to play, and it was just like, yeah, it was great. Got to just play like as much Smash as I had always wanted. But like this. That was before online play with like the local scenes. It's kind of like a crapshoot. I don't know like who was playing the most back then. Like you probably had to have like a good tolerance to play with computers opponents because like the best players. I don't know how long people can like stand to get bodied by them. Like unless you have like a kind of like a cycle or a group of people to go through every time.
Yeah.
I think that's worth. Oh, sorry. I think that's worth calling out specifically. Just a single point here in that none of this is possible online. Like there was no online back then for Smash. You could not play with anybody outside of in person. And so that's necessitates this moving around stuff. Like for Street Fighter, when Benny and I were active, like we had the option of online, and we just said it sucked and we would rather play in person. But you didn't even have that option back then. Um,
Uh,
so sorry, Benny, I cut you off, but I just wanted
Oh
to
yeah,
get that
yeah.
one out
No, I
there.
was just gonna say like the whole, the whole traveling aspect, where like you said, going to like the other cities and stuff like that. Being in Alaska, being in Anchorage, like that was something that when somebody would visit, like whether even if it was like a kind of like a OG player from the scene or something like that, or just a friend, like oh I have a friend from Cali, and like yeah, there would be like you said like people housing. There would be somebody to house them, and and then like whenever they if they would go to like the local tournament or the Ranbat, people would announce and be like, hey, so and so's in town, and a lot of people would kind of just come out and be like, okay, get higher attendance numbers just because of that. I remember one in particular. I don't know. I don't remember his name. It was somebody just said, "Oh, this guy's coming from Japan." And I was just like, I think I beat him. I beat him in the Ranbat, and somebody was just like, "Oh, that's the guy that was from Japan." And I was just like, and I was just like, I didn't even know who the hell it was. I was just like, he's nobody special to me. Like, I just
uh,
kind of like laughed it off. But like I just remember, people, it was like you said, like you have that notoriety, like people were like hyping it up, like, oh, there's forwards here, blah blah blah, like he's gonna be playing in our tournament. Um, but the thing I wanted to ask you in terms of that was like, was there any notable like wins or achievements that you had along that way, like when you were traveling? Like how would you like assess your like performance during that time?
it was pretty good. I went on like a 3 month win streak or something like that. Like the first tournament I went to was in Massachusetts, and then like the next weekend or 2 weeks after, I had gone to a local in New York. So Massachusetts, I got like fifth place, and then New York, I got second. But then after that, I won like a tournament every weekend, and I think that went on for like 12 weeks or something like that. So that was pretty cool. Um, yeah.
That's awesome. I'm just thinking like the forward tour. Like, where's he go? What city's going to next?
like
Oh
he's a
yeah.
stand-up comic or something, and he's headlining the show. Just come to our tournament featuring forward.
Oh man, it was and yeah, people were I won't say lining up, but yeah, people were like asking me to come.
Yeah,
And I'll even say this: Justin Wong wanted me to just go stay with him in New York, actually.
nice.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I actually met Justin Wong. That was like the first time. So um it was New York, right? Like my second or third week starting to travel. And there was this like gaming lounge that we were at for the tournament. And we walk in and my friend's like, "Oh, there he is. There's Justin." And it's like they had kind of like a bar and he's sitting at the bar, this dark shadowy figure, and I'm like, "Oh, there he is." There's the legend and stuff. And I'm like trying to be all nonchalant. I'm talking to the owner. Yeah, I'm from Arizona. I play Smash. Yeah. Okay. And then like Justin's like kind of looking like, oh my God, he's looking at me. So like trying not to like fanboy or anything like that. But eventually like we got to talking and I like, oh yeah, I'm a big Marvel fan and like sorry I saw you like lose Mighty and you got kind of wrecked, but like so that was cool. And then so that was like the first time I met him. And then it was like when I went back to the East Coast for Evo East, he was like, "Hey man, like it was just kind of like last minute at the end of the tournament. I was supposed to go with somebody to Connecticut, and there wasn't a tournament there, but it's just go practice." And then Justin's like, "Hey, where are you going after this?" And I'm like, "Connecticut." He's like, "You should come to New York." I was like, "Can you house me?" He's like, "Yeah." I was like, all right, I don't know when I'm gonna get the chance to like, play with Justin Wong again. So like
Yeah.
let's do this. And it probably like took a hit on my smash skills because I think after that I wasn't like the next tournament I wasn't as like sharp as I could have been, I think. But it
Yeah.
was worth it. Like I got to the player he passed away kind of recently, Flash Gordon. But I got to meet him. Like I played some Super Turbo with him. I played some NBC 2. I got to play like all these fighting games that I just loved. And like, oh, where's the like alternate universe forward is like this is what he's doing. He's traveling to play all the Street Fighter games or something.
I
Got a
think
got a sample of it.
that's a beautiful like part of the storyline here, where you've gone from uh, explaining the origins and saying, hey, I saw these clips or these videos, I've heard of these players like Alex Valle or John Choi or Justin Wong, and now you're hanging out with them and playing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I do want to call a specific thing out here, though, in that it's not just that you achieved that goal. It's the way you achieved that goal. You wanted that same notoriety that they had, but you got it in a completely different way, and I would argue a way that's more lasting for the human experience, where rather than staying in your spot and getting famous, you actually got famous by going to the community and giving back to the community in that way, leveling them up too. And it's very different, but I think that actually contributes to why everybody acknowledged you as one of the best, or the best in Arizona, but also one of the best in the country. Is because not just that someone saw a video of you or like there were whispers or anything, you were just out there putting yourself out there and showing them in person and then leveling them up too. And I like giving back to the community is always such a beautiful thing to see. And I want to just call you out there, compliment you on that one. That's a really cool way to approach that problem and solve it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't think I ever thought about it that way, but because I think just so much about like what everyone was doing for me. Everyone's doing huge favors to like open up their houses to me and take time out of their schedule to hang out with me or keep me entertained at some level. So like I feel, mostly that like not that I was a burden, but I feel like I was the one taking from everything. So it's like I guess now that you mention it, it's like, yeah, I mean, like if people were happy to be playing with me and like they got something out of our shared experience together, then that's good. I can do that.
Yeah,
I've
I just no, I was gonna say I just think about it from the other perspective too, because like um Armando was talking about that in terms of like um Latif doing well and then him doing well and then somebody talking about like, oh, I played this person. Oh no, that was I'm sorry, that was Tubazo. He was talking about how he had met somebody when they were younger and then he ran into them again at Wednesday night fights. So like I think about the other side of the coin with you, like somebody could be telling the story, be like, "Oh yeah, there was this one time, back in 2006 when I housed forward when he was on his nationwide tour, and I got to play some games with him, and like that was awesome." Like and somebody's probably looking at you in that kind of same light, the same way that you're talking about Justin Wall.
I think, yeah, I've actually had a few people tell me that like between there's so a few people have told me like, yeah, you were like my first opponent or something that I ever played in bracket, or like the first out of state player I ever played or like that. So yeah, it did kind of come around full circle that like the same way how I was kind of inspired by other people, like I ended up doing that. I think I have inspired some people to play as well. So um
Nice.
yeah, nice.
and your point earlier about being a burden and whatnot, or rather like couch surfing and whatnot, like the reality is that like the finances and whatnot back then, like that was just a huge factor. But I feel like as we've gotten older, and particularly with the show and how we've gotten a chance to interview so many different people, the currency is in memories more so than than actual money. Where like the good memories that we make with people, the lasting friendships and relationships that you have, the start of a relationship like with Justin Wong, and how that actually segues really nicely into like how you knew him in the Marvel days, it sounds like, or like why like you were able to hit it off with him in Marvel 3, or like and get on that stage as well. And I'd love to talk a little bit about post Smash, when you got back into competitive FGC or traditional 2D fighting games, and what that was like.
Yeah, so how did that go? That's a kind of interesting because it my interest like across the genres has kind of waved. Like it's hard to be really consistent in both games. Like the skills just don't transfer over. So like in '07, '08. mostly in Tucson. So like I moved out of Tucson in 2010. Um, and like that whole time, like Smash was, mostly the thing. Like I had actually started playing a little bit of Third Strike. Like I met Abe. Um, I've known Rock for a while too, and so like kind of had some experience there, but maybe like reconnected with them a little bit, like when I got back to Tucson, and got a little bit back into those games. But like 2010, when I moved to Phoenix, it was like Marvel 3 released like not long afterwards, and then yeah, that game just like it clicked. I picked it up and I loved it. So I don't know, like the transition, it was just always, always being a gamer, always playing games and enjoying them. And, like the next one happened to hit and that I really liked. And it hit such a sweet spot too. Marvel 3 came out and it was like part Marvel 2, like part Melee. To me, anyways, it had like a lot of elements of like those games that I loved. And I guess that's what kept me with it. That's what made me stick with it so much.
Out of curiosity, like what about Marvel was very similar to Smash?
The movement. Smash Brothers, like it's you hear it a lot with Marvel, like all the neutral and stuff. Like some of the hypest moments are like when people go 15 game seconds without hitting each other. It's just like it's really hyped to watch people like move around the screen and control space, and that's very like melee-ish. Um, and then that so there's that part, but it was still like I loved Marvel too, and it still felt like Marvel 2 in a lot of ways. That it really just hit like the sweet spot of like both of those. You know, it felt like there was a lot of freedom. Um, and I guess kind of like the discovery too, right? Like new fighting games are always exciting because of that discovery phase. Everyone's figuring out what works, and there was just so much that you could do in the games.
I agree. And again, like with Marvel 3 in particular, it was not the internet was obviously around, but it wasn't a big tech sharing session as much. We still had kind of like localized tech, and then you ended up like being the figurehead for a lot of like Armando was the figurehead for a lot of Shuma tech, and frankly, I don't think anybody really played that character at a high level even now. But and I like you were the Doom and Strider guy basically. But I actually was curious about in vanilla. Were you were there any particular characters that you were well known for in vanilla before Strider came out?
She-Hulk, maybe.
Oh yeah, you played She-Hulk. I forgot about your
I was
She-Hulk.
yeah, I was a
Oh,
She-Hulk player. I almost had a really good team. I used She-Hulk, Spencer, Chris. Had I just dropped Chris and like gotten a real assist like that was a really deadly team. But yeah.
I forgot about your
Actually, what's
Chris
so
too.
funny? It's I'm not gonna call it a curse, but it's another funny coincidence between like Smash and Marvel or just other fighting games. But like Arizona in particular, that like I was the number one player in Arizona for a long time for Melee, and I played like Falco, who's like maybe the second most popular character. Not the best, like he's generally like around fifth or something, right? So,
Mhm.
but anyways, like I made room. Like after I was dethroned, it was Axe that took my spot. Axe is like player. And then it was like Marvel, almost the same thing happened. That like I played Doom Striders, like a high tier shell, and I was early on that. And then like Armando is the Shuma player, so it's like
Yeah,
weird Arizona characters. Like I'm the precursor to them or something.
I've noticed that's actually a really common theme with Arizona in particular. Like if I look at who we're known for Street Fighter 4 as well, it was like at first it was Juicebox, his Abel, and no one played Abel back then. That was the oddball character. And then Scott made a name for himself with Sakura. Uh, and then Latif played Viper, and back then Viper wasn't really common. Actually, sidebar on Viper is my first fighting game tournament. I remember I played Ryu, but then eventually I switched to Viper, so like the second or third one. And then you happened to be at one of those tournaments, and everybody knew you, like all the old school people knew you. But I was like, oh man, there's a veteran player in our scene here that actually plays the same character as me. And I don't know if you remember meeting me back then, but I just remember being like, "Oh, this is cool. There's an OG that does it," you know. And
Yeah,
I tried to learn
I
some
kind of
stuff
do
from you.
remember that. It was it UAT, right?
Yeah, it was a UAT. Yep. And
Yeah.
I could barely do a Shoryuken motion, and you were busy doing all the feint stuff. And back then, we still thought that character was ass.
Yeah.
um, but actually, that does tie back into Viper though, because then Ultimate comes out, and you ended up switching to Viper Doomstrider, right? And
Yeah.
even that was still such a unique team. I don't know anybody who really played that team back then because it was easier to just play Zero or Wolverine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um that I now like Marvel has had like 10 years to develop and the game has changed quite a bit, but not seeing Viper is still there. Like that hasn't changed. You still don't see that character. And I think what it actually goes to show is the character is just not as good as everybody thought she was.
Yeah.
Um she was a lot of people thought like, oh, Theory Viper is like just OP and really good. And then it's like, you know what, guys, it's been 10 years. We've had 10 years to see some like theory get put into action. And there's been like a handful of good Viper players, but like their results are always the same. Like between like me and Full Schedule, Marlon Pie,
Yep.
um, Static Alpha, probably a few more that like we got good and like we're threats in our scene, but like it was still the zeros or the novas or just any other character that just kind of ends up that like I think what happens is that we get we get good at fighting our opponents, like not so
Yeah.
much at like the matchup, but we're getting really good at like the player to player battles. And that can take you, I guess, pretty far in Marvel, right? Like you can overcome bad matchups because you have like really good player versus player matchups. But then you get out to like the wider scene and it's like, oh yeah, they have a Viper there too. They know how
They
to play
they
Viper. So
they know
it's
how to
like
deal with
I
this.
know
Yeah.
yeah, so like, I know like when Busy Cups and Angelic had played like Marlon Pie for the first time, I was like, they're gonna mess them up so bad. Like they know this matchup, they're not gonna be caught off guard by EX Seismo or something like that. And I think that's what you saw a lot of with that character as the game went on. People just kind of learned and figured it out, and she just didn't have the tools and the utility that the other top tiers had.
Yeah, I can get behind that one. Or alternatively, like the execution level was just too volatile for consistent tournament play, right? She might have just been too hard to to actually do really well.
Yeah, I mean, that could be. I think it just wasn't there though. Like maybe like the hardest tech I think that could have made her better is if she had like consistent conversions off of size mode. But otherwise it's like Seismo zoning is just like a worse version of zero zoning, Magneto or Morgan. Like any of those characters have better zoning than Viper. And
Sure.
then like her offense is really good when she gets close, right? She's got like very fast downwards air dash, kind of like Nova. Um, but even still, like you have to get close to do that. And so she doesn't have like the ground speed or the air dash speed that Nova has or Wolverine or Spencer has. So like she was just like a little bit worse in all the areas that like the better characters like were better at, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so it's like I think had if she had either like something more of like Spencer's dash where she just went farther across the screen, or like Nova's air dash, or a really like reliable conversion that you could do like. Did you get soul drain combos, right? Like, Magneto clipped you with Morgan, and now you hit like 12 fireballs. You're just spamming them and throwing them out. Like, if there was something like that, like, oh, you got hit by Doom Plasma, now you get hit by 20 size modes, like that would be great. You know?
Yeah.
But she doesn't have that. So, you know,
She, she struck me as a jack of all trades character where she had every option, but it was a worse version of the characters that specialized in that option, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly how she is.
Yeah.
Nice, nice. So, like recently, like when I've seen you, like you've been playing Third Strike. Um,
Yeah.
so I always thought it was one thing great about you was like, yeah, I'd heard about the stuff about Smash and how good you were with that, and then like you said with Marvel 3, like that, you were one of the top players for in our scene for Marvel 3 as well. And then like Third Strike, like I mean, I don't really play that game, but like I've seen like the times of like the sessions that I would go to, like I could see your improvement like from session to session. And I'm just like, oh man, he's like figuring stuff out, like whether it was parries or other stuff. I think I played you casually too, like here and there in the cabs or whatever. And like, yeah, like I could see your improvement like in that too. So like, how did that come about? Because that's something that actually Nam put in the chat. He was like, "Is that why you play a lot of old games now? Old man games these days? You already had to start with Justin. So what got you getting into Third Strike now out of all time?"
Yeah, right. That's a good question. Um, Third Strike, another timeless fighting game. I think people are just they're gonna be playing it like forever. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know, probably the same thing with four, and I bet five will probably have a scene that sticks around with it. So that'll be interesting to see where that goes in the future. But so yeah, like back in the day, uh, you know, Street Fighter was bigger than Melee was. And like I played Melee because I couldn't play Street Fighter. Like we just didn't have a big Street Fighter scene. And it was kind of like I still liked Melee, but if I, had the choice, like I probably would have played more. And
Mm.
so I think it's um just an element of me like wanting to do the things in childhood that I never had the chance to do.
Aw.
For me, it was just like 15-year-old Sean, like south side of Tucson with nobody to play Street Fighter against. I just wanted to like give that version of Sean like what he had always wanted. Um, but like no, the game is sick too though,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
It's,
Yeah.
and like yeah, to actually have like cabs, like the gaming zone's a great venue and have like good cabinets and like there's strong players and like every Friday night, like it was pretty regular, right? We get
Hmm.
maybe like 8 people or so and have like a nice rotation on that. Um, so uh, yeah, I guess I just got into it because it's sick.
How about some of the other like modern iterations of the other series, like Marvel Infinite or Smash Ultimate? How do you feel about
um,
those games?
I like those games. I would say so. Marvel Infinite, actually, I went really heavy on when that game first came out. I don't know if I ever got to play you in that, John. I don't know if you did play that one at all. Did you?
I think I played in like two tournaments, but I didn't
Yeah,
amount to anything in that game. But
because
yeah,
five was like the thing, right? That you were
for me,
pretty big
yeah,
into five.
yeah,
Yeah.
for me.
Well, yeah, Marvel Infinite came out. It was a lot of fun, but uh, didn't really have like I don't know. Did we have a tournament scene for that? A little
I
bit. There was a few tournaments. I don't
Yeah,
even know.
by then I had stopped running the tournaments. I think Steve had taken them over, and I think of Nam when I think of Nam who's in our stream chat right now. I think of MVC when I think of MVCI. I think of Nam, but it sounds like did you play with him regularly or was
Not regularly. I think maybe the person I ended up playing the most with was Hasm. He ended up getting
ah
back into the series a little bit when that game came out, and we played some then. But otherwise, yeah, the like the kind of local Arizona scene, like it was small, but like most of the Marvel 3 players got into NVCI at some point, and um, I got to play against a little bit of everybody, and that game was a blast too.
nice. Who'd you play in that game?
I played Jetta and Raccoon. I took Sonic Fox's team.
I get you.
I just knew I wanted to play Jetta because I like Darkstalkers and I liked him in that series. Um, Another old man game that I play, and then I just needed like a second character. So to watch like Sonic Fox, do so well with that team, I was like, okay, I guess that's the one to try.
Did you have that same like innovation itch that you had with all your other games where you wanted to like come up with new stuff with Jeddah or um
Oh yeah, like not in the same. The recognition was not really there. Like I guess that's mostly I've gotten that out of my system, but the that's still something that I enjoy in games, So like when Street Fighter 6 comes out, I'll have fun learning and discovering stuff in there. But yeah, with Marvel's just that type of game where you can spend a lot of time in training mode, like creating and developing new stuff. So definitely hit that. It did that well.
And how about Smash Ultimate? Did you? I think you had a stint with that too for a little while, right?
Yeah, so the Smash series has been kind of interesting, like post Melee. So when Brawl came out in 2008, like I was really into that game. I played it a lot. Like it was just such a breath of fresh air. It was really unique. And then Smash 4 came out and I didn't play it that much because it was just like much like Brawl. And then Ultimate, kind of the same thing. Like the series, and that's what you see too. Like all the top players in Ultimate, like most of them have been around since the Brawl days, and they were like top players on Brawl as well. So, like the game never because of that, like it never had like the newness factor that Brawl had for me. That kind of made me stick with Brawl for a while. But I would play the games like when Ultimate came out, I played it online for a while, and the online's not great there. But I actually still tell myself I gotta go to a local one of these days. Ultimate, like Grand Canyon University is, I guess, the closest one. It's not too far from me. That one of these Fridays, I'm still want to go out.
You just want to see what the kids are up to nowadays.
Yeah, get a little bit of that old school feeling of like competing again.
Yeah. Nice. Speaking of kids, like I know you're a family man now. Like, have your kids gotten into any fighting games or anything like that? Like,
No, my kids play shooters. They're big Fortnite fans. Yeah.
yeah.
Which is cool. I try to use, so my older son Ziad, he's like pretty nice at Fortnite. And I don't know if he like realizes it sometimes, but like I try to use it as an example that like what does it take to get good at something? It's like because I don't know, like that's out of everything he's done, that's the thing that he's right. That's what he's gotten better at than anything else. So it's like if you want to be good at something else, think about the time that you spent on Fortnite, and like that time that you put into there is what it takes to get good at things.
Yeah.
So you basically turned Fortnite into a life lesson.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I try. Yeah. That's why we're all here for, like, right? Like,
yeah,
we all have these video game life lessons and stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, I like as a father myself, like I do the same thing all the time too, right? Like I'll try to play a game with G, and like he'll get frustrated, like he doesn't figure something out right away, and I'm like, I'm good at this because I've played this a lot, I've done this a lot. Like you doing these like touch of death combos in Dragon Ball that you were showing me, you got good at that because you were sitting in training mode and repping those and doing those all the time. And you're like, hey, Dad, check this out, and I'm like, holy crap, like you know.
Mhm.
Seeing those kind of things, and it's like yeah, I do try to apply those same things to, like Johnson, like to life lessons. Like, well, you want to be, he was talking about doing like graphic design, and I was just like,
Mhm.
well, he's like, I'm not a good artist. I was just like, you think good artists are just born? Like there's people that
Right.
are like, they have sketchbooks, and they'll start sketchbooks, that's all they have, and then they'll see their progressions over the years and be like, man, this was me 5 years ago. Like I see that all the time on Twitter. Like this was me 10 years ago. This is a sketch I did. This is where I'm at now. And I'm like, holy shit, that's like photorealistic. So obviously, it's like somebody putting in the time, right? Putting in the work.
yeah. I frequently coin that as mastery, I suppose. Like just the concept of getting like the TED Talk thing about someone picking up the ukulele in 3 months or whatever that everyone always goes back to. Like it's like when I would explain that I was a competitive fighting game player to like older coworkers or previous generation folks, I'd just be like, yeah, you're playing video games and whatnot. But it is the idea of disciplining yourself to be like, okay, I want to dedicate my time and like having structured good practice and understanding where my mistakes are and being able to acknowledge those and improve upon those, like that those skills are universal in a lot of things. Like I've seen, I have a friend of mine who is really good at he's good at Street Fighter, but then he also decided to get into poker recently and applied some of that same logic as well. And nowadays he does Dark Souls speed running, and he shows me these spreadsheets of like all the different boss mechanics and how to and variance in his own performance and gauging that and using that to determine progress. And that's very similar to how I learned how to play guitar, and how I learned how to do my zero combos in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. There's just a lot of overlap in the concept of mastering something, whether that's a mechanical thing, an emotional thing, a psychological thing. You know,
Video games are bad, right?
Yeah, they rot your brain, dude. They rot your brain.
Oh yeah.
So you mentioned Street Fighter 6 as well. I am thinking a lot. I was thinking about when you were talking about Smash earlier and how you were the #1 ranked player in Arizona, and specifically the word ranked got to me. Where with Street Fighter 6 we have this this new start for a fighting game, and every fighting game that I've played in the past, it's always been a struggle to define who the best was at the time. Like we can look back on it retrospectively and be like, oh yeah, Sean was the best in Marvel. Then Armando he stepped up and he became the best. But you know, at the time it was still like really contentious. You didn't really know who the best was or what the gauge was. So my understanding with Smash though is that they actually had like a formal ranking system for Arizona, and I was curious about like how much you think that would impact. How would a ranking system like that work in today's day and age for Street Fighter 6?
But yeah, I think so. It's maybe not as good as something that's like more objective, like a point-based system, but to have like a panel, you know, it becomes kind of like democratic or republic in a way that like, you know, you've got multiple voices coming together and to come out with like a ranking system. And I when it's like local, so it's like it's done by like the local scene. So you know these are the people that they've got their ear to the ground, and you know they're familiar with the results and like who got what. So um, you know, and then I don't know, like so yeah, it would work, but the a ranking system is still kind of like limited, you know, like there's still like a lot of caveats that like, okay, yeah, you're ranked #1, but you have a bad matchup against ranked #7. Like, how do we weigh that or something like that?
Sure.
So I don't, you know, I guess it's good. It's probably like a good motivating piece, like for a community or anybody that's in it that like, hey guys, we're gonna have like ranking seasons and stuff like that. And it's you know, however the system is that you do it, like I've definitely seen like the motivation that it gives to people. Like, you know, friends are posting like it's you know it's just their local scene, but like that's so they're always proud like when they make that ranking for the first time or when they make some milestone like top 5. Um, so however you implement it, like I think you're definitely going to see engagement and enthusiasm from people for it.
I think one of the issues we ran into with Ranbats is that that was the Capcom fighters' way of figuring out like how we were gonna rank people or how to figure out who the best was. But there would often just be huge discrepancies in performance based on who would be able to show up to all 5 ranking battles, right? And so I'm frequently thinking about like what that methodology would be, like an ELO system, like a points-based system, or this is the first I've heard of the Smash ranking system being a democratic process of like a panel of people like coming together and voting and deciding that. And that's intriguing to me and something that I haven't seen tried. Well, the one time I've seen it tried for Street Fighter 4 was with the True Grid Invitational that Abe used to run, where he would just pick the top 8 players and have them play in a round robin. And that also
was that Abe's. Was that just Abe's picks?
It was Abe's
Like,
picks. Yeah.
Okay.
So that has all the caveats that you think it does, where it's like, okay, well, people are going to argue about that and people don't agree with that. Or we have a qualifier like Benny qualified for it and he had to fight his way through the bracket to get there versus me, who I didn't have to qualify for it at all. I just got invited. Yeah.
Qualifier.
The qualifier. Yeah. And I'm sure we'll talk to Abe about that one in the future, but
Yeah.
I'm curious about whether a panel would work for 6.
That's so funny. No offense to Abe, but it just seems like so like him that it's like, yeah, it's Caesar Abe, you know, like this is my top 8 guys.
No, I remember making comments in our Facebook group where it was just like, if you didn't feel you were good enough, then you know what, come out to the qualifier and prove yourself, right? Like this is a invitational. And like, it's literally in its name. It's who he wants to invite and who he feels
Right.
is worthy of his time and of this placing, and that's his choice. And like,
Yeah.
I think the original story was like he didn't even want to have a qualifier, but there was enough people
Nope.
crying about it, which is why the qualifier was created in the first place. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I was the type of person like, I'm quick to kind of check my ego at the door, and I'm just like, well, if he didn't think I was good enough, then you know what? Maybe I just got to prove myself better the next time around. Maybe I'll get consideration next. You know what I mean? Like, that's how I looked at it. Other people were just like, oh, what? This is bullshit. Like, I'm one of those guys, and I'm like, whatever.
So now,
Yeah.
now I'm thinking in terms of 6 as far as like panels go too, and it's like, who? I wonder, like, so who was on the Smash panel that decided that you were the best in the state?
It changed throughout the years, you know, like it was kind of like, and maybe even some years like it's informal, like this was all done on like message boards for the most part back in the day. And then, you know, like who are the panelists would tend to change like, you know, throughout the years. So, you know, maybe even like there's some years where it's like it wasn't even posted on a message board or something, but like I just, so, you know, um it's not always like, I don't know, best in the state is like it's a little loose sometimes, but in any case, yeah, it you know, generally be like 5 people. But even these days, like there's every year there's like a top 100 list for Smash that will come out, and that one is all like panel based as well. And I think what they do is they just, you know, they do like the weighted scores of the players. So like, you know, the number person that gets voted number one by the most people, um, that's that's how their rankings work there. And
Okay.
again, like it's I think it's really good for like the engagement. You know,
Yeah.
like people want to be, they want to be ranked. If they don't want to be ranked, like they might still be interested enough that they want to rank other people. Like who doesn't like making tier lists, right? Everybody loves
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So now they get to do it with players. And,
And feelings.
Yeah, no, that gives me a great idea. Like what you guys are talking about, and what it makes me think of, like, in the sports world, there's what they call like power rankings, right? So like every week in the NFL, the 18 weeks, and like after every week, they rank. There's different sites will do their power rankings, right? And it's not necessarily the team that has the best record. It's like, is this team trending up? Is it trending down based on this last week's performance and that kind of thing? Something that I don't know. You guys are giving me ideas for. I think it could be something fun to do with with the right people, and it can, like you said, like engagement. We could publicly publish like who's ranking who. So then, like, if
yeah.
Sean thinks I'm the number 5 player in
Well,
the team, and I go to the scene and I win the random bat, I'll be like in the camera, be like, "Hey, Sean, guess who's number
yeah.
one now?" Like, haha, that kind of thing.
I mean, there's precedence for just the people on this call engaging it. Like Benny, you ran that Scrub Cup tournament as well, and that was based off of the Abe's True Grit rankings, which was anybody who was
No,
in or was that right? Was that right or
no,
no?
I went with a completely quantitative approach. Like
Oh,
I went through like a bunch of challenge brackets, and I found everybody that had made a top 8, and I excluded them,
okay.
including myself. And I remember, who was the person? It was Louis, a scumbag, and he's like, "Why am I excluded from this?" And I was like, "Well, I found a bracket from like 5 years ago where you made 7th. So guess what? You're just excluded, and that's just the way my rankings are gonna go. Like, too bad. Like, this is I don't want anybody to question like what this is, but you made a top 8. You don't get to play in this." And I was
Yeah.
actually, it's funny you bring that up, John, because I was actually just looking through the group about that, and it was
Yeah.
one of the things where you were like, "Man, this exclusion list is crazy. Like it's crazy long, but I still had a good turnout of people. So that just shows like maybe I mean, how many other people came out of the woodwork for something like that because they were like,
Yeah.
well, so and so, my demon who always makes top eight isn't here anymore, so maybe I'll do better."
Yeah, that's the prime example I have for engagement of the community from the Capcom side, which is like, yeah, people were more inclined to play, or they were more excited when there were those kind of oddball rules like that, where you didn't have to worry about getting beat up by whoever the top player was. I think that was a big problem in Street Fighter V, where our community stagnated because it was the same three people winning over and over and over again, and like after a while, like, and that happens with Ranbats too. It's just like after a while, Sean and Armando are winning everything, and so like there's not a lot of reason to go to the fifth one unless there's a
Yeah.
charity tournament. um, but yeah, I don't know. You gave me a lot of food for thought there, Sean and Benny. If you've got all those ideas, I've tried in the past to implement something like that. I talked with Rock about the Donisen system that the Japanese used, and I had
Yeah.
this app that I was building to like get people to put. But the problem is, it always requires user input, right? You need people to actually input the results and be able to track their matches. And often, back then, just wasn't really a thing because you needed an internet connection and you needed to be able to upload the results and verify those results. And nowadays, Smash GG does most of that for us. So
Yeah.
theoretically, like if we just hit the Smash GG API, we could
That's
really draw all
exactly
that
it.
stuff.
That's exactly where I was going, and that, that kind of
Oh
just fits in
man.
with, like how I introduced you as the technical mastermind of this episode.
Oh, this is an absolute guard thing now. Okay. Oh, there you go,
Great.
Sean. You just inspired us.
There you go. Smash solves all the FGC's problems.
Nice, nice. And like, okay, so before we kind of close things out here, was there anything you wanted to promote? Well, actually, um, first question: who do you plan on playing in Street Fighter Six? Two, is there anything that you want to promote or anything that you're getting into that you want to talk about before we kind of close things out
Um, in Street Fighter 6, I think I want to play Jamie. I
here?
want to try this character out. Um, but I don't know. We'll see. I usually end up picking like I was playing Birdie in season 1 of Street Fighter 5. Like I kind of like ugly characters sometimes,
You
and
do.
I don't know who's gonna fit that bill in like Street Fighter 6. And then, okay, what am I into now? Right now, I'm into tennis. So I have an open challenge to anybody in our FGC, including
Ooh.
you, John, that plays tennis or used to play tennis. Come play with me sometime.
I,
That's all.
I keep forgetting about that. I remember there was an invite there, and I haven't played tennis since high school, but that might be similar to how you want to go out and play Smash Ultimate with the kids, right?
Am I the kid for you in this case? Hold
I
on.
guess not. Yeah, I think about it. Never mind. Never mind. Oh
Oh
man.
man. Well, you guys are
Very
the
cool.
kids to me. Oh
Yeah,
man.
we didn't talk. I still feel like a kid in the community. It's kind of weird. Like I guess I'm 35 now, and I play like the old games, so I think a lot of people see me as like somebody older in the community, which is a little weird because like I signed up as a 16-year-old on the Shoryuken forums and like Old Man River and Saber and all the old. To me, those are the old guys that were there, and I was the kid of the group, and I still feel like the kid of the group in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah,
I
I can
actually I
see
ran
that.
into that problem recently with the local scene with Street Fighter V, where it's like all of them are brand new and they're really young, and I'm used to going into a scene and being underestimated because I'm young or because I'm the TO and I have one hand tied behind my back because of that stuff. And then I came to a tournament and I'm like, oh shit, nobody's underestimating me here, and I'm the OG now, and this is really weird. Oh,
Tables that turn.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, man. It's been a good time talking to you, Sean. Like, yeah, hopefully you'll come back again. I mean, sure we could find more to talk about. We'll see how things go with Street Fighter 6.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. Like the time really flew by. I was surprised to see it was so late, like when I checked the time. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks for being on. To all of you watching, thank you very much for liking and subscribing on Spotify. You can find us on twitch.tv/spiral series, youtube.com/spiral series, and on Spotify you can search for Absolute Guard. Also follow us on Twitter, absolute_guard. We post clips from this show pretty regularly. Thanks everybody. Have a good night.